The Battlefield franchise has been one of the frontrunners for a lot of FPS gamers, and especially those who are looking for a balance between the realism and depth of games like Arma and the arcade run and gun style shooters of Call of Duty. And while the soon to be released Battlefield 2042 has had the Battlefield community waiting in anticipation, the recent beta has split the crowd a little bit. Hey guys, and welcome back. Today Nex and I are going to be breaking down what we thought of the recent Battlefield beta, what we liked, what we didn't like, and whether or not we agree with the general player base, some of whom seem a little disappointed. As always, if you feel like supporting the channel and you enjoy what you see, feel free to leave a like below, or if you feel like sticking with us for a while, you can click the sub button. Battlefield 2042 is admittedly a bit of a mixed bag. Set in the not too distant future where the world has been devastated by the impact of climate change, causing things like the collapse of the European Union and mass immigration. All of this is topped off with 70% of the Earth's orbiting satellites crashing down to the surface caused by something called the Kessler Syndrome, which, to be fair to the game, is an actual theoretical scenario if you want to go and check it out, although it's unlikely to be as fast or as the same magnitude as seen in Battlefield 2042. All of this shenanigans causes tension between America and Russia, who would have guessed, and war ultimately breaks out in the year 2042. I do want to start out by saying that fundamentally I did enjoy the game. Jumping in for the first time, I was struck by a number of changes, and as a massive lover of Battlefield 4, some were good and some were bad. Things like the HUD, the menus, removal of classes, the COD-style sliding mechanics, attachment system, and specialist characters all seemed like odd design choices to me. But saying that, the game did still feel great. Graphically it was good, and for me the heated firefights in close quarters still gave me the feel of the gunfights that I last experienced in Battlefield 4. On top of that, the gunplay didn't feel as sharp, and the weapons themselves I felt lost a bit of punch from previous games in the series, strangely while being at the same time more difficult to use. But I am willing to accept that this is because I'm bad at the game and I haven't gotten used to it yet. And if you're a player looking for a single player experience, you will not find one in 2042. Instead, the game's narrative will be played out in the multiplayer mode. To me, this seems like a way for the team to cut down on development time and throw everything into the multiplayer. But again, I could be wrong, and it might turn out to work pretty well when the game is released in November, given that there are no delays.
In an age of rapid technology growth, it would have been hard to visualize what war might look like by the year 2042. But DICE have come along to show us that it might just be a graphically beautiful experience, set where the sky is blue and sun shining, with Boston Dynamics dogs wielding guns on tap. All this with a medley of wartime audio that rounds off that sense of immersion you can come to expect from Battlefield, where natural oddities randomly appear to wreak havoc on the environment. The beta takes us to a single map called Orbital, to play a game mode called Conquest where you accumulate points for your team by capturing objectives across the map. In a turn away from its predecessors, Battlefield have done away with their class system, where weapon and gear options were predefined in order for a player to pick and play in a role which everyone would acknowledge and be able to play around. Instead, you now pick a specialist, ones that have minor distinctions similar to the aforementioned classes, but also offer a large amount of customization that fall outside their expected role, like medics carrying missiles to take down planes, for example. Of course, this type of customization seems great for the individual, but we have to question whether this will be a beneficial change for a game that heavily revolved around squad play. The gunplay for us is middle of the road so far. I spent way too much time playing with the iron sights until Bias kindly told me about the attachments menu, which is a pretty cool interface to manage your loadout on the fly. When using the sniper, it was useful to alter the range of my scope and adds to this overall picture we started to see in game design, not trying to pin you down into one type of gameplay. A strange characteristic of the iron sights themselves is the level of zoom you seem to get when looking through them. I'm aware this has been the case in past games, but it doesn't make too much sense to me. Whilst trying to tag our enemies, we occasionally felt like the hit detection was a bit off, and you don't get the most satisfying or noticeable feedback from hitting them either. The time to kill is reasonable for large-scale combat. It doesn't come close to the speed of more hardcore shooters, nor do people feel as spongy as a game like Apex, but it falls somewhere nicely in between. Rather than a minimalist approach to the UI, as a Battlefield game, the interface has everything you need to know about the goings-on. Objective locations were clearly marked, including seeing how far away they are through terrain. Team and squad overviews are laid out well to present the essential information, and my only suggestion for improvement is that requests from allies to revive seem to be map-wide, and consume the chat box on the left at times. In my opinion, this should be limited to those that are in the close vicinity of you and your squad. On the battlefield itself, players can call in things like their personal combat robot or a vehicle. The vehicles themselves range from ground to air, and fairly soon after the start of a game will establish their dominance across the map. Like it or hate it, it's what gives this chaotic feel to the battlefield's large maps. And if you find yourself poorly positioned, which I did way too many times, you'll be sent packing from the skies as a common occurrence. When you get taken out, you get put into a down state, something that for me disjoints the flow of action the way it's managed so far. Too many times I'm staring at myself on the floor, begging for assistance globally to the map, and people are just running past doing their thing. You have the option to force the respawn so you aren't lying there for too long, but it's a bit of a deflating experience you have to go through the majority of times you get taken down. Mobility overall is pretty good in my opinion. Sprinting is infinite, so everyone is rushing around all over the place, and you can manage a mediocre slide that feels good enough to use frequently, but not in an overly unrealistic way. I can see some may have issues with this kind of feature, along with being able to grapple hook to nearby objects, as just a step too far from the experience that the Battlefield franchise has represented thus far. Despite the beta not running for that long, it gave us more than enough understanding of what to expect from the release. There were a number of bugs or issues that we came across while playing, like the fact that it was difficult to distinguish between allies and foes at times, but most weren't major hindrances to gameplay and were so obvious that we think they're likely to be fixed at launch. There's just no way the devs would leave whatever the situation was with this elevator, for example. DICE are clearly trying to modernise and push the boundaries of their game design, but I wonder if because of this, players will be playing more individually and losing the necessity of squad play, people like me will be lying on the floor looking at myself way too much, and if fans of old will see it as a step in the right direction for the franchise.
Overall, this is a bit of a confusing beta to me. While there are echoes of the older BF4 game that I loved so much in the past and still play now, there have been a number of design choices that I feel move away from that winning formula into something a little more shallow, and with less character. While slide mechanics are cool in games like Apex and COD, these kinds of things feel a little out of place. The same is true for the grapple hooks, which Titanfall nailed but again feels a bit out of place in a more realistic Battlefield game. I think a large number of players love the old Battlefields because they filled a specific niche in the market, and they weren't like other titles out there. However, now it seems that DICE have decided to move closer to the design choices of their competitors, and in doing so have strayed from the style that their community was built on. However, while there were some things that I didn't particularly agree with, I did enjoy the overall experience, and I don't personally think it's as bad as some people have said, or the game media is making it out to be. It is still clearly a Battlefield title, and while yes, they could have carried more across from Battlefield 4, it's also true that the industry moves forwards through the practice of trying new things. New things aren't always necessarily better, but sometimes it's worth the risk. I'm still really looking forward to the full release later this year, assuming there are no delays to solve players' concerns. Let us know what you think of the game down in the comments. We're the Bullet Sponges, and we'll see you in the next one.